Hello, y'all. At the core of our existence is this longing for connection, to be seen, and to be accepted. I've grown up around college students my entire life, and I've always heard the question asked of, do you see me? Yet this question is very rarely asked verbally, but rather it's the underlining theme to my conversations. I ask them questions like, what's your major? What are you passionate about? What do you want to do with your life? And there's always this ache of, do you see me? In their answers. And I have found that the greatest moments of my life have been the moments where I've had the privilege of seeing others and where I've taken the risk to be seen. And to expand on that, I want to reference this folder. Now, this folder has my entire academic history in it. And there's lots of different stories in here, but there's one story from the 3rd grade that I want to talk about. Now, in the 3rd grade, I had the highest caliber of testing done to see if I had a learning disability and if I needed to be placed in a special education room. And after all the testing was done, a table full of experts sat down and they looked at my file. And based off what was in front of them, they came to the conclusion that I should be placed in a special education room. However, there was one person in that room who saw me, and it was my 3rd grade teacher. And she said, "Let me tell you about Allison." She said, "Allison is passionate, and she loves people. And she's the type of student that goes after students that are not being included and invites them in. And although school is exceedingly hard for Allison, she always gets to the same place everyone else is at. It just takes her a little bit more time." And she pulled out one of the test results and said, "This is who Allison is." And it was a test on adaptability. And she said, "Allison has the uncanny ability to take what she knows and apply it to a situation or circumstance she has no previous context of understanding, and she can navigate that situation with success." And my parents turned to her and said, "What will happen if we take Allison out of her normal classroom?" And she said, "It will kill her. Because one person saw me, my entire world changed. Because my teacher had the courage to see me, she gave me the freedom to be me. She knew that I needed to be in a classroom with other students. She knew that I had the tenacity and grit necessary to not only navigate having a learning disability, but to be successful despite it. Because she saw me, she gave me the freedom to be me. And there is freedom in being seen. However, freedom requires vulnerability. It requires owning that we're broken and messy, which is something that our society tells us is a weakness. However, I see it as a strength. For example, if you think that naming that I have a learning disability in front of any one person, let alone an auditorium, is easy, let me tell you, it's not. And if you would have told me at the beginning of applying to be part of TEDxGCU that I would be naming this, I would say you're crazy, because it was nowhere on my radar. I would have told you I wanted to talk about the difference between looking and seeing, but I had lots of other stories I was planning on talking about. But then one very wise person asked me, "Allison, why aren't you talking about your learning disability?" And my response was, "Because it's scary, and because I don't want to, and that feels really vulnerable and hard. And I don't know that I want the first thing the world to know about me is that I have a learning disability, because I've spent my entire life trying to hide that I have one." But 2 thoughts came to mind after I answered that person. The first was, curse you, Brené Brown, and your TED Talk on vulnerability and your Daring Greatly book, because it's one of my favorites. And the second thought that came to mind was, I ask my students and my friends and my family to have courage to be seen. And I'm also a leader who likes to lead by example. So I knew it was time for me to step into the light and name this truth. So I started working on my TED Talk, and a week before the trials, I kept asking myself, do I really have anything worth saying? Does this really matter? And 2 days before the trials, I got my answer. I was grabbing a cup of coffee on campus, and another RD and a student walked in. And we just started talking, And the student didn't know that I was auditioning for TED. And when they found out, they got so excited for me. They were like, "What are you teaching on? And how are you feeling?" And I believe my exact response was, "Okay." And I said that I'm teaching on the difference between looking versus seeing, which I'm really excited about. However, I'm talking about something that I don't usually name, which is that I have a learning disability, and that feels really hard for me. And this student got a little bit quiet and said, "I never knew you had a learning disability." And with tears starting to fill her eyes, she said, "What do you have?" And I said, "I have a type of dyslexia. It falls in that category, but it's not exactly." And as I responded, the tears started to fall from her eyes, and she said, "I've never met an adult who's been successful, who's navigated having dyslexia. I've only met peers that have it, and I have dyslexia." And in that moment, I began to cry because I understood. And I met her eyes and I said, "I know that you have had to work harder than anyone else knows. And I know that you don't feel like people see you, but I see you." And in that moment, I embraced her and she embraced me, and we just allowed ourselves to be seen by one another. And I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. And once again, I was reminded of how sweet it is to be seen. If we're going to be people that choose to see, it's imperative that we understand the difference between looking versus seeing. And the best breakdown I've ever heard comes from Christine Caine, who says the difference between looking versus seeing is that looking allows us the opportunity to look past, or to look away, or to look through. But seeing stirs our hearts in such a way that we cannot unsee what we have seen, and we must respond to it. Seeing requires courage and hope and risk and your heart showing up, but it is glorious. So once again, I want to lead by example and let you see me. Hello, my name is Allison freaking Johnson, and no, my middle name is not freaking, but I'm proud of who I am. I am an extrovert and an artist and a theologian. I am a daughter and a sister and a friend. I am a risk taker, coffee drinker, and world traveler. I dance often and I laugh very loudly. I have a learning disability. At certain times, I suck at spelling, and reading out loud is really, really challenging for me. And I've had enough speech therapy that I can communicate my thoughts, but it's really challenging sometimes. But I always have struggled with this idea of, am I enough? And yet I still love who I am. I'm aware that at the end of the day, even though I struggle with my insecurities, who I am is good enough. Who I am is smart enough. And who I am is worthy enough to be seen. And I want to say that although I have a learning disability, it doesn't define me. What if you did what I just did? What if you named truth about yourself? What if you stepped into the light and said, who I am is good enough? What if you stopped allowing what people think of you or what you've done in your past to define who you are, but rather you declared in this moment that I am enough just as me? What if you didn't settle for a world that just looked, but that saw? Because if we chose to be part of that world, we wouldn't let stereotypes on race or gender or socioeconomic standing or education or sexual orientation dictate what we see, but rather we would see a person who has a name, who has a story. We talk about the change that we want to see in our world, yet are we brave enough to walk into the tension of looking, but rather seeing people now? Our world has become so dehumanized that everything is about us. And we have more conversations with screens than we do people standing right in front of us. One thing that Dr. Brené Brown brings up in her book, Daring Greatly, is this thought of, when was the last time you went to like a coffee shop? And when you ordered your coffee, you looked the barista in the eyes and you thanked them and you used their name. When I first read this, it wrecked me because it made me ask the question, do I see everyone I interact with? If we re-engage with our world, we will see things that disrupt us. We will see things that break our hearts because looking is easier. Looking is safer because it gives me the opportunity to put an arm's distance between me and that person. But when I see someone, I get to be a part of something great. When I see someone, I see a daughter or a son. I see a friend. I see someone who's broken and messy, but who has dreams and aspirations. I see someone who wants to be seen, and my heart connects with them because I too want to be seen. I don't have this world all figured out. And I have lots of days where, as I'm trying to interact and see people, I know it's hard. But I don't want to be someone who disregards you because it's going to get hard for me, because it's going to be messy for me to engage with you. I want to see you because you are worth being seen, just as I am. I have voices in my head that tell me to live small and to live safe and to not see. But I fight those voices by telling myself that who I am, again, is good enough. That I must be all of the goodness of who I am and who I was meant to be by being all of who I am, me. I must own my faults and my failures regardless. And I want to give you one more story before I leave that helps me to keep coming back to knowing that seeing is worth it. And it does make a difference. I remember taking my final exam in college, and as I left that room, I realized that was the last thing I needed to finish before I was completely done and graduated with college. And I was overwhelmed with emotion, so I went to my college advisor's office to try and connect with him because he knew. But when I got there, he wasn't there. So I turned to leave and ended up crossing paths with another one of my professors. And he said hello and asked how I was doing, and then realized I had tears in my eyes and said, what's going on? And I said, I just finished my last final of college, and I'm done. And he wished me a huge congratulations, but at this point, the tears started streaming down my face. And he said, what's going on for you? And I said, I've just done the impossible, and I don't even know how to engage with it. And he turned and looked rather confused, and I said, I have a learning disability. And some of my earliest memories growing up were from doctors and teachers who told me that I would never be in a normal classroom, that I would never graduate from high school or get into college or even go to college. So the fact that I've just finished the impossible is beyond what I can fathom and process in my head right now. And my teacher turned to me and said, I have no idea you had a learning disability. And he said, if I would have known, I probably would have graded some of your papers differently. And he honored that he had caught grammatical and spelling mistakes that I had made. But he didn't know it was because I had a learning disability. And I turned to my professor and I said, that is the greatest thing you could have ever given me, and I wouldn't trade those grades for anything. And I left after he wished me another huge congratulations with one of the most important and impactful lessons of my life. Because I had allowed myself to be seen by my professor, I got an answer that I'd always wondered. I had just attained the impossible, and he didn't pity me, and he didn't feel sorry for me. My best was good enough, and I was smart enough. And I had gotten to the same place everyone else was. It just took me a little bit more time. And by being seen in that moment, it made me apply for jobs and go for things that I didn't think I could do, like be a resident director at Grand Canyon University, or believe that I could have my master's degree before 25. Because I was seen in that moment, I have had the opportunity to see countless other students and to make a difference in their life, which has brought me endless joy in my own life. Because I was seen in that moment, I got to live my dreams and I got to be me. Because of that moment and so many others, I am the person who I am today. And I will continue to allow myself to be seen and to see other students so that they too can possibly attain the ability to be the fullness of their character. So as I end today, I want to ask you, will you join me in seeing and being seen? Will you not just look at me, but have the courage to see me? Will you have the courage to see the person sitting next to you or the person behind you? When you leave here today and you pass by all the other students, will you truly see them? And I want to take it one step further and say, will you have the courage to be seen? Will you be all of the goodness of who you are and who you were meant to be? Will you put down the mask of, I'm fine, and own your broken and messy self? There are people in your life who have earned the right to see you. Will you let them? Will you choose to live a life of wholeheartedness and be real and authentic and vulnerable? Because if we choose to be people who see and are seen, we just might be a part of something great. Thank you very much.